Good evening, night owls and restless minds. Welcome to Disturbed Historian, where the past doesn't sleep quietly, and neither do we. Before we plunge into tonight's epic, let's take a moment. Where are you right now? Are you cozied up with a flickering lamp in a creaky apartment, the city lights painting patterns on your window? Maybe you're in a midnight break room, the fluorescent hum your only companion, nursing a forgotten cup of coffee. Or perhaps you're in the back seat of a bus, cutting through the dark, watching the world blur by. Take a breath. Feel the night around you. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Tell me, what time is it by your clock? Is the moon high in the sky, or are the first hints of dawn just breaking? And more importantly, what keeps you awake tonight? Is it a restless thought, a problem you can't quite solve? Or is it a story, a history, a question that won't let go? Share it with us. Let's weave this sleepless night into a vast, shimmering constellation of wandering souls, connected across time zones and distances by the quiet hum of curiosity. Tonight, we're not just scratching the surface of history, we're diving headfirst into the very heart of power itself, the kind of power that doesn't just build cities, but forges entire civilizations, the kind that, when unchecked, can shatter everything it touches, the kind that lingers like a shadow, long after the fires of ambition have burned out and the dust of ages has settled. This isn't just a story. This is the saga of the Roman Empire, the birth of blood and stone from myth to republic. It wasn't born in a day, nor did it crumble overnight. Oh no, this empire clawed its way from the dirt, from a muddy riverbank in central Italy. It burned with a fierce, almost blinding light for centuries, stretching its grasp across an entire known world. And then it fractured. It crumbled slowly, tragically, cracked by its own boundless ambition, eroded by the relentless grind of time, yet somehow, miraculously, never truly silenced. Forget the dusty, dry lectures you endured in school. This is the raw, unfiltered, visceral saga of a scrappy river town that transformed itself into the absolute terror of the ancient world, and then, in a twist of fate, lost it all, leaving behind echoes that still haunt our modern world. So if you can, kill the lights. Let the night wrap around you like a worn, comforting cloak. Let the endless hum of the world, with all its daily anxieties, gently fade into the background. Because this story, this epic journey, truly begins in the shadows, with wolves, with ancient whispers, and with the primal, inescapable call of war. Let's start exactly where myth and memory, history and legend, truly begin to blur. With two brothers, Romulus and Remus. They were twins, abandoned at birth, cast into the swift, unforgiving current of the Tiber River like forgotten scraps of destiny. Their mother, Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin, was tragically forced to break her sacred vows by the ruthless ambition of Amulius, a king determined to secure his throne by eliminating any rivals, even newborn ones. Their father. Some whispered it was Mars, the fierce Roman god of war himself, a divine progenitor of their violent destiny. Others murmured darkly of mortal treachery, a tale of earthly betrayal, perhaps a local lord or a scheming noble. Either way, the twins were born unwanted, destined for a swift and silent death. But fate, or perhaps something far, far older and more mysterious, intervened. A she-wolf, so the legend passionately proclaims, found them tangled in the river's reeds. Her milk, warm and wild, sustained their tiny lives. Her den, a dark and secret place carved into the earth, shielded them from the elements and prowling predators. Birds, those silent witnesses of the wild, brought them scraps of food, dropping morsels from the sky. A gentle river nymph, a spirit of the flowing waters, guarded their innocent sleep, her whispers blending with the Tiber's ceaseless flow. Is this truly what happened? Perhaps. Or perhaps it's a powerful story, a foundational myth woven by a people who desperately needed their origins to feel fierce, primal, divinely ordained. Or perhaps more simply, it's a profound metaphor for Rome itself, a city born in violence, suckled by the raw power of nature, and undeniably destined to fight. The twins grew wild, strong, and brimming with a barely contained anger. Raised by a kindly shepherd and his wife, they became shepherds themselves by trade, but outlaws by their very instinct. They roamed the untamed Seven Hills, leading bands of wanderers, exiles, and misfits, men with no homes but boundless dreams. They weren't kings yet, just hardened survivors, shaped by the gnawing pangs of hunger, the bitter taste of betrayal, and the constant threat of rival clans. When the time finally came to build their city, their chosen destiny, they didn't negotiate, they didn't share. They stood on separate hills, Romulus on the commanding Palatine, its slopes offering a natural fortress, Remus on the defiant Aventine, its rugged heights a symbol of resistance, each vehemently claiming the god's favor for his chosen site. Augurs, the ancient Roman priests, watched the skies intently, counting the ominous flight of vultures to decide who would be the sacred founder. Romulus saw 12, a powerful sign of divine approval, their wings cutting sharp arcs against the dawn. Remus saw only 6, a lesser omen, yet he refused to yield. The gods, it seemed, undeniably favored Romulus. But pride, that most dangerous of human flaws, rarely bows to omens. Remus, in a fatal act of defiance, mocked his brother's fledgling, modest walls, leaping over them with a contemptuous sneer, his laughter echoing across the hills. Romulus, consumed by rage and the weight of his destiny, struck him down, a single brutal act of fratricide. Blood soaked the earth where the city's first walls rose, and so the city was born, forever stained by blood, and it was named for the victor, Rome. Blood was its very foundation, and blood, as we will see, would be its enduring legacy. The early Romans were no polished aristocratic nobles, far from it. They were an eclectic mix of outcasts, exiles, runaway slaves, and desperate wanderers, all drawn to the powerful, intoxicating promise of something greater, something new. Their city was a gritty patchwork, half fortress, half bustling village, its rough-hewn walls rising defiantly from the dirt of 7 distinct hills. The Palatine became the heart of power, where kings and later emperors would build their palaces. The Capitoline, with its sacred temples, stood as a spiritual beacon dedicated to Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. The Aventine, once Remus's choice, became home to the plebs, its slopes crowded with the dreams and struggles of the common folk. Their early kings were formidable figures, warriors, priests, and stern judges. Numa Pompilius, the second king, gave them intricate laws and a pantheon of gods, weaving religion into the fabric of daily life with festivals and rituals. Ancus Marcius, with visionary foresight, built vital bridges across the Tiber and thriving ports to connect Rome to the sea, Tullus Hostilius, a warrior king, crushed rival tribes, expanding Rome's reach through sheer force. But the seventh king, Tarquin the Proud, pushed his absolute power too far. His tyranny, marked by oppressive taxes, brutal murders, and his son's heinous crime against Lucretia, a noblewoman whose honor sparked outrage, ignited the spark of rebellion. In 509 BC, the Romans, fueled by righteous anger, drove him out, swearing a solemn oath never again to bow to the will of a king. In his place, they forged something entirely new, a republic. This wasn't a democracy as we understand it today, with universal suffrage and equality. Instead, it was a complex system where power was shared, unevenly, yes, but shared nonetheless, among powerful senators, annually elected consuls, and the burgeoning mass of the common people. 2 consuls, elected each year, held the reins of executive power, their dual leadership a safeguard against tyranny. The Senate, a council composed of the elite and wealthy, expertly pulled the strings of political influence, their debates shaping Rome's destiny. The plebs, the common folk, had a voice, but only if they fought tooth and nail for it, often through strikes or protests in the forum. It was messy, often corrupt, and undeniably brutal. But for a significant period, it worked. For a significant period of time. The unstoppable march, conquest, law, and the Republic's roar. The Republic, in many ways, was Rome's tumultuous adolescence, a period of chaotic yet undeniably ambitious and seemingly unstoppable growth. Surrounded on all sides by enemies, the fierce Sabines in the rugged hills, the sophisticated Etruscans to the north with their advanced metallurgy, the resilient Samnites to the south with their mountain strongholds, and the formidable Gauls from beyond the distant Alps, Rome didn't merely survive, it absolutely thrived. Every war was a brutal, yet invaluable lesson. Every painful defeat, like the Gallic sack of Rome in 390 BC, was a blueprint for future victory, teaching Rome to fortify its walls and hone its tactics. The Romans were relentless in their pursuit of dominance, their legendary discipline forged in the intense, unyielding fires of constant conflict. Their legions were the absolute backbone of this burgeoning empire. These weren't just mere soldiers. They were highly efficient, disciplined machines of war, men trained to march in perfect lockstep for days on end, to kill without hesitation when commanded, and to face death without a flicker of fear. They wore practical armor of bronze and later iron for protection, their rectangular scutum shields forming an unbreakable wall. They carried short, deadly gladius swords for close-quarters combat, designed to thrust through gaps in enemy lines. Their formations, like the testudo, a tortoise of interlocked shields, were terrifyingly effective, allowing them to advance under a hail of arrows. As they conquered, they built roads, straight, enduring lines of stone that seemed to defy nature itself. These roads weren't just paths. They were the very veins and arteries of Rome, pumping its lifeblood, armies, trade, and Rome's iron will, across towering mountains, rushing rivers, and vast open plains. Mile markers, inscribed with distances and emperors' names, dotted these routes, enduring testaments to Rome's engineering prowess and its unwavering determination. But Rome's strength wasn't solely in its gleaming swords and disciplined legions. It was equally, if not more, in its laws. The 12 tables, meticulously carved in bronze around 450 BC, laid down a comprehensive set of rules for almost everything: marriage, complex debts, property ownership, even the proper way to bury the dead. They were undeniably harsh. A debtor could be enslaved, a thief executed without mercy, a father held life and death power over his children. But they provided order, a rigid framework that bound Rome's inherent chaos into something far stronger and more cohesive. These laws, much like the roads, stretched far beyond Rome's original borders, imposing Rome's absolute will on its newly conquered peoples. Magistrates called praetors traveled to provinces, ensuring Roman justice reached even the farthest outposts. The Republic's hunger for expansion was simply insatiable. First, it systematically swallowed the entire Italian peninsula, crushing rival tribes and cities through sheer, grinding persistence. The Latin League, once Rome's allies, was subdued by 338 BC, its cities forced to adopt Roman laws and supply troops. Then came the legendary Punic Wars, 3 brutal existential conflicts with Carthage, Rome's formidable maritime rival across the sparkling Mediterranean. The First Punic War, 264 to 241 BC, was a monumental naval slugfest, with Rome, astonishingly, building a massive fleet from scratch, copying Carthaginian designs and adding the corvus, a boarding bridge that turned sea battles into land-style combat. They wrested control of Sicily, a vital grain-producing island. The Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BC, brought the military genius of Hannibal, Carthage's brilliant general. He audaciously marched war elephants over the frozen Alps, a feat that stunned the ancient world. His victories at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae, where he annihilated 70,000 Romans in a single day, were masterclasses in strategy. Yet Rome, with its characteristic resilience, endured. It raised new legions, harassed Hannibal's supply lines, and avoided direct battles until he faltered. General Scipio Africanus turned the tide, defeating Hannibal at Zama in 202 BC. The Third Punic War, 149–146 BC, was a grim epilogue. Rome, driven by fear and vengeance, besieged Carthage for 3 years, burned it to the ground, enslaved its people, and symbolically salted its fields. Rome's chilling message was clear: cross us, and you will simply cease to exist. By 200 BC, Rome was no longer just a powerful city-state. It was an undeniable global power, systematically gobbling up the ancient wonders of Greece, the vital grain fields of Egypt, and the immense riches of the East. Wealth, unimaginable wealth, poured in: gold, vast quantities of grain, thousands of slaves. Senators built opulent villas on the sun-drenched hills, their floors gleaming with intricate mosaics depicting gods and victories. Merchants grew rich trading olive oil, wine, and exotic goods from distant lands. Meanwhile, the poor crowded into multi-story insulae, rickety, fire-prone tenements, leaning precariously over noisy, bustling markets. The chasm between the fabulously rich and the struggling plebs widened dramatically, and a dangerous resentment simmered just beneath the surface. The Republic's complex system, originally designed for a small, compact city, groaned and creaked under the immense weight of an ever-expanding empire. Senators openly bribed voters with grain and games. Consuls shamelessly rigged elections with promises of wealth. Generals, bloated with the spoils of conquest, grew far more powerful than the state itself, their armies loyal to them alone. armies once loyal to Rome now swore their allegiance to individual men, charismatic leaders like Marius, who reformed the legions to include landless men, or Sulla, who marched on Rome itself in 88 BC, setting a dangerous precedent. And then one man rose above them all, casting a colossal shadow over the fading republic, Julius Caesar. The Colossus and the fall from republic to empire. Brilliant, utterly ruthless, hand-adored by the surging masses, yet vehemently despised by the entrenched elite, Caesar was like a magnificent comet, dazzling in its appearance, incredibly dangerous in its trajectory, and ultimately tragically doomed. He conquered Gaul, modern-day France and Belgium, adding vast new lands and immense wealth to Rome's already overflowing coffers. His commentaries on the Gallic War, written with sharp clarity, were both military reports and political propaganda, cementing his legend among the people. His military victories at Alesia, where he besieged an entire Gallic army, transformed him into a hero to the common people, but an existential threat to the powerful Senate, who feared his ambition. In 49 BC, in an act that defied all convention, he famously crossed the Rubicon River with his loyal army, an undeniable act of treason, a direct declaration of war against the very republic he had sworn to serve. The Senate's orders were clear: disband your army or be declared an enemy of the state. Caesar, with a single legion, chose defiance. Rome trembled to its foundations, but it was already too late. Caesar seized absolute power, boldly naming himself Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. He reformed existing laws, redistributing land to veterans and the poor. He fixed the ancient calendar, creating the Julian calendar, whose 365.25 days still shape our own. He centralized power, weakening the Senate's grip. But his boundless ambition was in the end his tragic undoing. On the Ides of March 44 BC, a conspiracy of senators, fueled by fear and resentment, struck. Led by Brutus and Cassius, men he once called friends, they stabbed him 23 times in the very heart of the Senate. They believed in their misguided conviction that they had saved the Republic. They were profoundly, tragically wrong. Caesar's death unleashed absolute chaos. A brutal series of civil wars tore Rome apart, pitting faction against faction, ambition against ambition. Rivals clashed with furious intensity. The eloquent Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general; the idealistic Brutus, torn by duty; the pragmatic Cassius, a master of strategy; and a surprising young heir no one had truly expected, Octavian. At just 19 years old, he was Caesar's adopted son, a calculating and strategic prodigy. He formed the second triumvirate with Antony and Lepidus, hunting down Caesar's assassins. At Philippi in 42 BC, they crushed Brutus and Cassius, who died by their own hands. But the alliance was fragile. Octavian expertly outmaneuvered Antony, turning public opinion against him by exposing his affair with Cleopatra, Egypt's cunning queen. At the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, Octavian's navy crushed their combined fleets. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Alexandria, where they took their own lives. By 27 BC, Octavian stood alone, undisputed, taking the solemn name Augustus, the revered one. Augustus was no king. Romans, with their deep-seated history, utterly detested kings. He cleverly called himself Princeps, the first citizen. But make no mistake, he held all the armies, all the wealth, and all the true power firmly in his grasp. He famously rebuilt Rome in gleaming marble, boasting that he had found it a city of brick and left it a city of stone. He reformed the army, creating a permanent force loyal to the state. He established the Praetorian Guard, an elite unit to protect the emperor, though they would later become kingmakers themselves. Under his shrewd and masterful reign, the Republic quietly died, replaced by an empire cunningly disguised as ancient tradition. His reign initiated a veritable golden age. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, roughly spanning from 27 BC to 180 AD. The empire's borders stretched wide, from Britain's misty, windswept hills to Egypt's burning sands, from Germania's cold, unforgiving rivers to Syria's crowded, bustling markets. Roman roads, tens of thousands of miles of them, linked it all, carrying soldiers, diligent merchants, and vital ideas across vast distances. Majestic aqueducts like the Aqua Appia or Aqua Claudia brought fresh, clean water to burgeoning cities, their arches still standing today as marvels of engineering. Temples gleamed with polished marble, dedicated to gods like Apollo or Venus. Theatres echoed with the stirring poetry of Virgil, whose Aeneid tied Rome's destiny to Troy's ancient fall, or Ovid, whose scandalous verses led to his exile. The magnificent Colosseum, begun under Vespasian, would later host brutal gladiatorial contests and immense crowds roaring for the thrill of blood sport. For many, life during this time was remarkably stable, prosperous, and secure. Cities bloomed with grand forums, luxurious public baths, and beautiful fountains fed by aqueducts. Trade flourished, bringing in grain from Africa, exquisite silk from distant China via the Silk Road, fine wine from Gaul, and exotic spices from India. Roman ships, with their square sails and sturdy hulls, dominated the Mediterranean. Called Mare Nostrum, our sea, but this peace, it must be remembered, came at a steep cost. If you were a slave, a rebel, or a conquered people, Rome's peace often felt less like a blessing and more like an unbreakable chain. Taxes were heavy, rebellions crushed mercilessly, and entire peoples, like the Dacians under Trajan, were decimated to secure Rome's borders. Yet even behind all that glory, subtle cracks were already beginning to form. The empire was incredibly vast, its administration immense, but its very heart, the system of power, was surprisingly fragile. Power rested almost entirely on one man, the emperor, and not every emperor, unfortunately, possessed the wisdom and statesmanship of Augustus. Tiberius, his grim successor, ruled from a gloomy island, consumed by paranoia and cruelty, his vast network of spies strangling Rome's precious freedom. Caligula, a notoriously mad emperor, was rumored to have made his horse Incitatus a senator and brazenly demanded worship as a living god. His erratic reign ended in assassination after just 4 years. Nero, the infamous Nero, allegedly burned vast swathes of Rome to build his grandiose Domus Aurea, a golden palace sprawling over entire hills. He brutally murdered his mother Agrippina and his wife Octavia, and famously sang while the city smoldered. Though some historians argue this was propaganda by his enemies. His reign ended in forced suicide in 68 AD, sparking a year of chaos with 4 emperors vying for power. For every truly good emperor, like Trajan, who pushed the empire to its absolute geographical zenith in Dacia and Mesopotamia. Hadrian, who wisely built great walls in Britain and Germany to secure its borders, or Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who wrote profound meditations even amidst the turmoil of war and plague. There were others whose names were dripping with blood and infamy. The entire system worked only as well as the man at the very top, and ominously, the empire was growing too big, too costly to maintain, and far too complex for any single human to manage effectively. Life in the shadow of the eagle, daily lives and distant echoes. What was it really like to live in Rome's colossal shadow? Not as an emperor or a senator, bathed in the glow of power, but as an ordinary soul, breathing, working, dreaming, and simply existing under the immense, omnipresent weight of the empire. If you were a baker in Rome's bustling, gritty Subura district, your day began long before the first hint of dawn. You'd be kneading dough in a sweltering, smoke-filled shop, the air thick with flour and the scent of rising bread. Your oven, a massive glowing maw built into the thick wall, radiated intense heat, baking crusty, warm loaves for everyone, for the hungry slaves, the bustling merchants, and even the demanding soldiers, who might glare at you until you handed over free bread. You'd barter with grain merchants, haggle over prices, and keep a wary eye on competitors. Your life was an endless cycle of sweat and survival, but there was also a deep sense of pride. Your bread, after all, fed the very heart of the city. At night, you'd collapse onto a simple straw mattress, the distant roar of the city, your lullaby, dreaming of a day when your sons might inherit a better shop. If you were a woman, your world, though often confined by societal norms, was undeniably vital. You weren't officially a citizen, not in the cold eyes of Roman law, which reserved voting and office for men, but you were the undeniable glue that held the Roman family unit together. You meticulously taught your children to honor Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, carefully lighting the sacred fires at dawn with a prayer for prosperity. You wove cloth on a loom, managed a complex household, often with slaves to oversee, and meticulously negotiated crucial marriages to secure your family's status. Some women, like the formidable Livia, Augustus's wife, wielded immense power from the shadows, shaping emperors with whispers and subtle manipulation. Others, like the gifted poet Sulpicia, wrote poignant verses about love and longing, their words surviving when marble crumbled. Still others, like the Vestal virgins, held sacred roles, guarding Rome's eternal flame, though a single misstep could mean death by entombment. Your influence was quiet, often unseen, but it was powerful enough to move mountains. If you were a child, life was a profound gamble. Some were cherished, carefully raised for war or marriage, schooled rigorously in Latin, Greek, and the art of rhetoric by tutors in airy atriums. The others, tragically, were abandoned in dark alleys, left to the mercy of hungry wolves or indifferent strangers, a practice called expositio. Childhood in Rome wasn't soft. It was a harsh, unforgiving proving ground. Boys trained with wooden swords, mimicking legionaries, or learned the demanding skills of farming on rural estates. Girls mastered spinning wool, cooking, or the delicate art of pleasing suitors, their futures often tied to strategic marriages. Yet even amidst Rome's undeniable chaos, children still played, scratching out games like Ludus, the omnipresent weight of the empire, a chess-like strategy game on worn stone, their laughter echoing through the crowded, noisy markets. Festivals like the Ludi Romani brought joy, with chariot races and sweets shared among friends. If you were a slave, and millions were, Your life, simply put, wasn't your own. Captured in brutal wars, born into the unbreakable chains of servitude, or sold for a simple debt, you could be anything. A cook stirring simmering pots of lentils, a scribe meticulously copying ancient scrolls in a dimly lit room, or a gladiator bravely facing death in the roaring Colosseum, your life wagered on the crowd's whims. Some slaves, remarkably, rose to positions of great influence, managing vast estates or even advising powerful emperors as trusted freedmen. A rare few, like the philosopher Epictetus, even transcended their chains, their profound words outlasting their physical bondage. Others simply vanished into the dark, unforgiving mines of Hispania, the shadowy brothels of Pompeii, or the endless agricultural fields of Sicily, their names tragically erased from history. Freedom was possible, a master's arbitrary whim, a few saved coins through peculium, but it was always a distant, elusive star. If you were a soldier, you were Rome's very pulse, its beating heart. You marched tirelessly under the iconic eagle standard, your sturdy Calighi sandals slapping rhythmically on roads built to outlast empires. You slept in rough tents, on the cold dirt of Britannia or Parthia, one ear always open for the terrifying sounds of ambush. You fought Gauls, Parthians, Britons, not primarily for abstract glory, but for sheer survival, for the promise of 25 years of grueling service, and for a patch of land you might never actually see. Your comrades were your only family, bound by shared hardship. You carved your name on distant milestones, hoping, praying, that someone somewhere would remember. In camp you gambled with dice, shared coarse jokes and wrote letters home on wax tablets, your fingers stained with ink and dust. Life in Rome was undeniably loud, relentless and vibrantly alive. The city truly never slept. Streets buzzed constantly with the rumble of carts, forbidden during daylight, the shouts of vendors selling fish or figs, the incessant clink of coins in bustling markets. Insular, those precarious, rickety tenements leaned precariously over the chaos, their thin walls carrying the echoes of neighbors' arguments, babies' cries, and the desperate prayers of the poor. Fires were a constant, terrifying threat. A single spark in 64 AD's Great Fire reduced entire districts to ash. The rich lived apart, in serene villas on the quieter Palatine or Esquiline hills, their soothing fountains and intricate mosaics a world away from the clamor of the slums. Dinner parties or convivia were lavish affairs, with couches, wine, and exotic dishes like dormice or flamingo tongues. Religion shaped almost every single moment of Roman life. Romans honored the mighty Jupiter, king of the gods, Juno, protector of women, and Mars, god of war. But they also revered the Lares and Penates, benevolent, household gods guarding every home, their small shrines flickering with oil lamps. Omens were everywhere, the sudden flight of a bird, a distant thunderclap, a vivid dream interpreted by a haruspex. Priests meticulously read the entrails of sacrificed animals, to predict victory or foretell ruin, their knives flashing in temple courtyards. Superstition was as tangible and real as the stone beneath their feet. Charms hung over doorways, laurel wreaths, protective amulets shaped like phalluses to ward off malevolent spirits. Festivals filled the calendar, Saturnalia, where slaves briefly dined like masters, their roles reversed in joyful chaos. Lupercalia, where priests ran naked through the streets, playfully whipping passers-by with leather thongs for fertility. Sleep itself was a constant battle. Cities roared with the sounds of carts, incessant footsteps, and drunken, late-night songs from Popinay taverns. The poor slept on coarse straw, their bodies aching from labor. The rich reclined on soft feather beds, cooled by slaves waving fans. Some drank copious amounts of wine to drown out the perpetual noise. Others burned aromatic herbs like lavender, whispering earnest prayers to Somnus, the god of sleep, for precious rest. In villas, silence was a rare luxury, purchased only with immense wealth. In military camps, hardened soldiers slept lightly, their swords close at hand, one eye always open for barbarian raids. In the crowded slums, the city's relentless pulse became a strange, uneasy lullaby, lulling you into restless, uneasy dreams. Death was sleep's inevitable cousin. Romans respectfully buried their dead outside the city walls, lining the roads like the Appian Way with elaborate tombs, from grand mausoleums to simple urns. Inscriptions on these tombs often begged, Viator, Viator nomen meum loquere, traveler, traveler, speak my name. To be utterly forgotten was to them far worse than death itself. Even the poorest left simple stones etched with hope, praying that a passing traveler would read their names aloud, thereby keeping their precious memory alive through time. Funerals were elaborate. Mourners in black toga pulla, professional wailers, and processions with masks of ancestors. The dead were cremated or buried, their ashes stored in columbaria, dovecote-like structures for urns. Beyond the walls, Rome's barbarians and inner cracks. What did Rome actually look like to those beyond its formidable walls? To the so-called barbarians it both feared and conquered. They weren't primitive omnipresent savages, weight of the as empire, Rome often dismissively painted them in triumphal arches or scornful histories. They were diverse peoples, the resilient Gauls, the powerful Goths, the proud Parthians, each with their own complex gods, intricate laws, and deeply held dreams, often as sophisticated as Rome's own. The Gauls, in what is now modern France and Belgium, saw Rome as both an undeniable threat and an irresistible allure. Their various tribes, like the Aedui or Arverni, lived in hill forts called oppida, traded in gold, and worshipped gods like Taranis, the Thunderer. They fought fiercely, led by formidable chieftains like Vercingetorix, who bravely united them against Caesar in 52 BC at Alesia. They ultimately lost, surrounded by Caesar's ingenious double walls, but their spirit of defiance burned brightly. Over time, many adopted Roman ways, building towns with forums, speaking Latin, even worshipping Mercury alongside their traditional druids, who memorized epic poems and conducted rituals under sacred oaks. Rome didn't just conquer, it subtly, powerfully seduced, offering baths, wine, and citizenship to those who complied. The Parthians, and later the Sassanids in the powerful East, were Rome's true equals, a rival empire stretching from Mesopotamia to Persia. Their kings ruled from the magnificent city of Ctesiphon, their opulent palaces rivaling Rome's own grandeur, adorned with intricate reliefs of mounted archers. Their expert cavalry, with deadly composite bows, famously felled entire legions at Carrhae in 53 BC, pouring molten gold into the mouth of the captured General Crassus, a grim taunt at Rome's greed. They even captured Roman emperors like Valerian in 260 AD at Edessa, a humiliation Rome never ever forgot, immortalized in Persian rock reliefs. To them, Rome was a formidable mirror, a powerful rival to constantly outshine, not a master to blindly obey. Their silk-clad diplomats negotiated as equals, their culture blending Greek, Persian, and Indian influences. The Britons, on the very edge of the vast empire, resisted with fierce fury. Boudica, the courageous queen of the Iceni, led a massive rebellion in 60 AD, burning Roman cities like Londinium and slaughtering thousands, her fiery hair a symbol of defiance. Rome brutally crushed her, but her name echoed through history, a beacon for rebels. Britain eventually became Romanized, with villas, mosaics, and baths at places like Bath's sacred springs. Yet it steadfastly kept its unique Celtic soul, blending its ancient gods like Sulis with Minerva, its druidic rituals surviving in secret groves. Even the various Germanic tribes, the Franks, the Alemanni, the Goths, didn't universally hate Rome. Weight of the empire. Many eagerly served in its powerful armies as foederati, lived within its vibrant cities like Trier, and even married its daughters, creating hybrid cultures. When Alaric's Visigoths famously sacked Rome in 410 AD, it wasn't an act of pure hatred, it was an act of desperate frustration. Rome had promised them land, safety, and respect after years of service, and had failed to deliver. The sack was, in many ways, a desperate cry for belonging, not wanton destruction. They spared churches, a nod to their own Christian faith, showing Rome's cultural reach even among its enemies. But Rome's most dangerous enemies, ultimately, weren't solely outside its gates. They were an intrinsic part of its sprawling story, shaping it as much as they were shaped by it. Within Rome, social tensions festered. The plebs, increasingly marginalized, rioted for bread and land. The equites, a rising merchant class, challenged the old senatorial elite, demanding power. Slaves, like those in Spartacus's rebellion of 73-71 BC, rose in massive revolts, shaking Rome's foundations. Women, though voiceless in law, influenced politics through marriages and salons, their ambitions often clashing with rigid traditions. These internal cracks, as much as external threats, weakened Rome's core. The beginning of the end, crisis and transformation. By the 3rd century AD, the once mighty empire was visibly fraying at the edges. The crisis of the 3rd century, 235–284 AD, was a generation-long nightmare. Emperors rose and fell with terrifying speed, like leaves caught in a relentless storm, over 20 in a mere 50 years, most violently murdered, betrayed by their own Praetorian Guard or disloyal soldiers. Civil wars constantly fractured the empire, with generals declaring themselves emperor in distant provinces. The Gallic Empire in the west, 260–274 AD, and the Palmyrene Empire in the east, 270–273 AD, led by the audacious Queen Zenobia, broke away, challenging Rome's waning might with their own coins and armies. The economy completely crumbled. Coins, once made of pure silver, were debased with cheap copper, their value collapsing into worthlessness. Inflation soared to unimaginable heights. A simple loaf of bread became an unaffordable luxury, forcing families to barter or starve. The plague of Cyprian, 250–262 AD, a deadly and relentless pandemic, swept through cities, emptying homes and markets with terrifying efficiency, killing up to half the population in some areas. Borders weakened, becoming porous. Germanic tribes, the Franks, the Alemanni, the Goths, raided deeper and deeper into Roman territory, sacking cities like Athens. The powerful Sassanids in the east captured key cities like Antioch and even Roman emperors, their victories celebrated in Persian art. Rome, once invincible, was now bleeding present weight of the empire. Yet astonishingly, it endured. Emperors like Aurelian, 270–275 AD, the restorer of the world, fought tirelessly to reunite the empire with relentless, brutal campaigns, defeating Zenobia and the Gallic rebels. He built the massive Aurelian walls around Rome, a stark admission of vulnerability. Diocletian, 284–305 AD, a tough soldier-turned-reformer, made a desperate attempt to save it. He boldly split the vast empire into the Tetrarchy, 4 rulers, 2 senior Augusti and 2 junior Caesars, governing east and west, to ease the immense burden of rule. He reformed the complex tax system, demanding payment in goods when coins failed. He stabilized the debased currency with the solidus, a gold coin that restored some trust. He rebuilt the shattered armies, stationing them along fortified borders. Persecution of Christians intensified, a desperate, final bid to unify the empire under the old pagan gods, blaming Christians for divine disfavor. For a brief time it seemed to work, but the empire was simply too vast, too deeply fractured, and too fundamentally broken. The Tetrarchy collapsed into civil wars, as ambitious emperors vied for absolute power. The entire system, from its foundations, was slowly, irrevocably rotting from within, its bureaucracy bloated, its loyalty divided. The cross and the city. Christianity rises, Rome shifts. Then came Constantine, 306–337 AD. He was a ruthless warrior, a shrewd politician, and undeniably a visionary. He reunited the empire, albeit briefly, through sheer blood and cunning, decisively defeating his rivals, most notably Maxentius, at the pivotal Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312 AD. Legend has it that he saw a brilliant cross in the sky, emblazoned with the Latin words in hoc signo vinces. In this sign, you will conquer. Whether literally true or a powerful myth crafted to unite his troops, it fundamentally changed the course of history. Christianity, once a whispered secret in distant Judea, had grown steadily, powerfully, despite Rome's brutal cruelty. Fed to lions, burned alive, Christians bravely prayed in the hidden catacombs beneath Rome, their unwavering faith spreading like wildfire among slaves, women, and the poor. Their message of hope, salvation, and equality before God resonated in an empire of rigid hierarchies. Constantine's Edict of Milan in 313 AD legalized their worship, granting freedom of religion across the empire. He didn't make Christianity the official state. Religion immediately. That came later, under Emperor Theodosius in 380 AD, with the Edict of Thessalonica, but he undeniably gave it immense power and influence. He funded churches like the Basilica of St. Peter, built on the Vatican Hill. Crosses replaced the proud Roman eagles on banners. Omnipresent weight Bishops of the became empire. Influential advisors, their power rivaling that of seasoned senators. Constantine then embarked on an even more audacious project. He built a new capital, Constantinople, located strategically on the Bosporus, straddling the vital crossroads of Europe and Asia. It was designed as an impregnable fortress city, rich with trade and pulsating with its newfound faith. Its massive Theodosian walls, layered with moats and towers, were considered impregnable, standing for centuries. Its markets bustled with the shimmer of silk, the aroma of exotic spices, and the diverse voices of merchants from Arabia to India. The hippodrome roared with chariot races. The Hagia Sophia, though built later, would rise as a Christian marvel. It became the new Rome, leaving the old traditional Rome to slowly fade into the background, a city of memory rather than power. The old gods, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, slowly, inexorably dimmed. Their majestic temples grew quiet. Their once revered statues toppled or repurposed for Christian churches. Christianity fundamentally reshaped Rome's very soul, offering a promise of eternal salvation where once only earthly glory reigned. But it also ironically divided the empire further. Pagan traditionalists, like the senator Symmachus, clung fiercely to the old ways, arguing for religious tolerance, while Christians, emboldened by imperial favor, aggressively pushed for dominance. The empire's fragile unity frayed even more as theological debates over Christ's nature sparked riots and councils like Nicaea in 325 AD. The last breath and the endless legacy. By the 5th century, the Western Roman Empire was a mere shadow of its former self. Rome itself, the fabled eternal city, was no longer the undisputed heart of power, overshadowed by Constantinople and regional capitals like Ravenna. In 410 AD, Alaric's Visigoths brutally sacked it. 3 horrifying days of systematic looting, churches stripped bare, proud nobles dragged from their hiding places. It had been an astonishing 800 years since a foreign enemy, the Gauls, had dared to breach its sacred walls in 390 BC. In 455 AD, the Vandals, a Germanic tribe, arrived, plundering the city for a devastating 14 days, carting away untold treasures, including the menorah from Jerusalem's temple, to Carthage. Each successive sack chipped away at Rome's deeply ingrained myth of invincibility. The once proud legions, Rome's legendary backbone, were hollowed out, filled with mercenaries, Goths, Huns, Alans, loyal only to coin, not to Rome itself. Emperors became mere puppets, raised and toppled by powerful generals or foreign barbarian warlords like Ricimer. Cities shrank dramatically as trade collapsed. Aqueducts leaked and crumbled, leaving fountains dry. Roads cracked and deteriorated, overgrown with weeds. The empire wasn't truly conquered in one grand battle. It slowly, agonizingly eroded, its marble cracking under the relentless weight of the empire, neglect, and internal strife. In 476 AD, the very last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, a mere boy, a tragic symbol bearing the names of Rome's founder and first emperor, was quietly deposed by Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain. There was no grand climactic battle, no epic heroic last stand, just a quiet, almost unnoticed surrender in Ravenna. He was simply sent to a comfortable villa in Campania, a forgotten footnote in the vast annals of history, his imperial regalia sent to Constantinople as a gesture of submission. The Eastern Empire, what we now call the Byzantine Empire, remarkably endured, carrying Rome's flickering flame for another 1,000 years until 1453. Its emperors ruled from Constantinople, their lavish courts gleaming with gold mosaics, their disciplined armies holding the line against Persians, Arabs, and Turks. Greek replaced Latin, Christianity defined its soul, but it still called itself Roman, preserving Roman law and engineering. But in the West, the light of Rome seemed irrevocably to go out. Or did it? Rome's ghost, an idea that never dies. Rome fell, but it never truly vanished. Its enduring bones are everywhere around us, woven into the very fabric of our modern world. The roads we drive on, often straight as Roman highways, still echo their engineering. Some, like the Appian Way, are still walkable today. The laws we meticulously follow, based on principles like innocent until proven guilty, or the concept of a legal contract, are deeply rooted in the foundational 12 tables and Roman jurists like Gaius. The very words we speak, Latin's countless children in English, Senate, Republic; French, Aroi from Rex; Spanish, Imperio; Italian, Città from Civitas, carry its linguistic DNA. The churches we pray in, often built directly on Roman foundations, their majestic arches echoing ancient basilicas like the Basilica of Maxentius. The church itself became Rome's most enduring heir. The Pope, residing amidst Rome's magnificent ruins in the Vatican, wielded a spiritual and temporal power that even emperors once envied. Bishops governed like ancient consuls, administering vast cities from Milan to Antioch. Grand cathedrals like St. Peter's or Notre Dame rose where forums once stood, their towering domes inspired directly by Roman engineering, like the Pantheon's perfect concrete dome. Rome's meticulous order became the rhythmic backbone of Christian faith, its elaborate rituals blending ancient pagan festivals like Saturnalia with Christmas, Lupercalia with purification rites. Kings throughout history felt Rome's irresistible pull. Charlemagne, crowned in 800 AD in Rome's St. Peter's, boldly called himself Emperor of the Romans, uniting Europe under a new Roman dream. The Holy Roman Empire, from the 10th century, claimed Rome's imperial mantle, its emperors crowned with Roman-style laurels, though its power was fragmented weight of the empire. Even Napoleon in the 19th century self-consciously styled himself a new Caesar, his vast empire a deliberate shadow of Rome's glory, his Arc de Triomphe echoing Roman triumphal arches. Today, Rome vividly lingers in the very grids of our modern cities. Washington, D.C. with its Senate and Capitol Hill, direct nods to Roman governance. Lisbon with its aqueduct modeled on Rome's. In our fundamental laws, the principle of innocent until proven guilty, a profound Roman legal innovation, or the concept of a jury, rooted in Roman courts. In our calendars, July for Julius Caesar, August for Augustus, the 365-day structure from the Julian Reform. In our timeless art and architecture, the ubiquitous eagles on flags, the laurel wreaths in Logos, the majestic arches in Lisbon or Paris, the soaring domes of capitals worldwide, and in our enduring stories, the gladiators, the emperors, the epic betrayals, all constantly remade in films like Gladiator, books like I, Claudius, and games like Total War Rome. Rome is not merely a place or a time. Rome is an idea, and true ideas, unlike empires of stone, don't ever truly die. They simply hide in ancient scrolls, carefully preserved by diligent monks in medieval monasteries, in magnificent ruins buried beneath green fields in Italy or Tunisia, in the quiet dreams of poets and passionate rebels across centuries. They whisper in the profound silence of a broken aqueduct, its arches framing the sunset, in the graceful curve of a cathedral dome, echoing the Pantheon, in the timeless rhythm of a Latin phrase like Carpe Diem or Veni Vidi Vici. Rome is gone, yes, in its physical form, but it is undeniably here, in your very breath. In the streets you walk upon, in the deep, resonant stories you carry within you. So as the night deepens around you, as the last candle flickers low, Let Rome finally fade into the comforting shadows. Let its emperors, its fiery rebels, its countless ghosts grow still and silent. You have walked its ancient roads, heard its distant cries, felt its epic rise and its inevitable fall. Now truly rest, not like a senator, tragically betrayed amidst silk and gold. Not like an emperor, alone in the chill of exile, but like a quiet ghost in a silent forum, where the gentle wind carries only the soft, persistent whispers of memory. Sleep well, dear traveler. The empire is gone. The world for now is gloriously still. Good night from the disturbed historian. May the past hold you close as you drift into dreams, and if Rome's powerful echoes continue to stir something within you, make sure to subscribe and join us next time to unearth another restless, captivating story from the deep, vast darkness of history.